Elizabeth at A Literary Princess, and today I am talking about what Victorian literature do I want to read. So this is kind of a connected video with the what Victorian literature have I read. As with that, I made a list challenge of 100 Victorian books that I want to read, and I figured I would share them with you since it's Victober. So we've got 100 books to get through, so let's jump right in. Although we'll go a little bit slower than the last video because last time I was racing against the camera dying, and we're not doing that this time. So let's jump in. First up is Ariadne by Ouida. I don't know much about this. I know this is one of her Italian novels, and it sounds like there might be a woman artist in it, but I'm not sure. I have a Kindle edition in like the complete works of Ouida, and most of them have a little summary at the beginning, but not this one, so. Next is Bluebeard's Keys and Other Stories by Anne Thackeray Ritchie. Anne Thackeray Ritchie did a lot of fairy tale retellings, and this is one of them. And I, as someone who loves fairy tale retellings, am extremely interested to see what a Victorian retelling of Bluebeard will look like. Mother Jacob by George Eliot. This is a short story. I'm actually going to be reading this in November for my George Eliot project. Finally get to one I have a physical copy of. Can You Forgive Her by Anthony Trollope. This is the first book in the Palliser series? Palliser. I really don't know much about this, but I like Anthony Trollope so far, and I do have all of the Palliser series and all of the Chronicles of Barsetshire on this list. I really hate this copy though, like the orange. Oof. I thought I was getting a black spine edition, and then this showed up. Oof. But, you know. Yeah. Charlotte's Inheritance by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. So I found out after I made this list that this is actually the second novel in, I guess, a duology, and the first one is Birds of Prey. So I want to read both of them, but Birds of Prey is not actually on my list. Charlotte's Inheritance just sounded like an interesting title to me. Poems of Christina Rossetti. I have read selections of Christina Rossetti's poems, including The Goblin Market, as you know from my last video on this. But I would really like to read all of them. I actually came across a Penguin Black Spine edition of all of her poems in a bookstore once, and I didn't get it, and I have been regretting that decision ever since. Cloven Foot by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. I don't know much about this one. I'm pretty sure it involves a dancer, though. The Complete Fairy Tales of Oscar Wilde. Again, I like fairy tales. Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is one that I kind of can't believe I haven't read, and I don't even own a physical copy of. But I don't, and I haven't. The Curate in Charge by Margaret Oliphant. I just really love Oliphant. I want to read everything by her. There's a lot of her on here. Daisy Chain by Charlotte Mary Young. I read The Clever Woman of the Family and really enjoyed it, so I do want to read more from Young. And The Daisy Chain, I think, is a children's story, and it sounds like a good place to start. Deerbrook by Harriet Martineau. I've heard really good things about this, I believe from Kate Howe, and possibly somebody else, but I can't remember who else. I have never read any Martineau, but I am interested in women writers. So, The Doctor's Family by Margaret Oliphant. This is one of the Chronicles of Carlingford. I think it is the first full-length novel, but technically the third work in the series. Dr. Thorne by Anthony Trollope. This is one of the Barsetshire Chronicles. The Doctor's Wife by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Lots of doctors. This is actually a book I am hoping to use in my dissertation. It is Braddon's reworking of Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. I actually have a friend that did a paper on this, and that is where my interest in it first came. Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens. I do want to finish off all of Charles Dickens' books, and I've heard that Dombey and Son is really good. The Duke's Children by Anthony Trollope, another Palliser book. Eleanor's Victory by Mary Elizabeth Braddon, one of her sensation novels, I believe. The Egoist by George Meredith. I've heard that this is really kind of hard to get through, but ultimately very worth it, and the summary sounds interesting to me. The Eustace Diamonds by Anthony Trollope, also a Palliser book. Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. I know, I can't believe I haven't read this either. This is actually on my Victober TBR. Considering how things are going and how much time is left of Victober, I don't think I'm gonna get to it, but you never know, we'll see. Felix Holt, The Radical by George Eliot. This is the last full-length novel of George Eliot's that I have to read. I will be getting to it, I think at the beginning of next year for the George Eliot project. I really don't know what this is about, so. Full Farine by Ouida, and no, I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly. This is another one that Ouida scholars talk about fairly frequently, and it sounds interesting, but I don't really know what it's about. Framley Parsonage by Anthony Trollope, another Barsetshire book. Arthoin, A Story of a Welsh Homestead by Alan Rain, which I believe is a pen name for a woman writer, if I remember correctly. I don't know what this is about, but I think it was somebody in a comment on another video, probably one of my underrated Victorian recommendations, suggested Alan Rain, so I figured I would put them on here. The George Eliot Letters. So I actually currently have 3 volumes of her letters out of the library that I needed for my dissertation prospectus. There are 9 volumes in total. I will not be reading these anytime soon, but I would really like to read them all at some point. Gloriana, or The Revolution of 1900 by Florence Dixie. Katie from Books and Things has been talking about this one a lot. It is a New Woman novel. It sounds really interesting. The Golden Calf by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Also don't really know what this one's about, but it sounded interesting. Half Sisters by Geraldine Jewsbury. This is another one that I got recommended from Katie at Books and Things. It sounds really good. Heir of Radcliffe by Charlotte Mary Young. This one is talked about a lot by Kate Howe, and again, I want to read more Young. Mother's Darling by Charlotte Rydell. Charlotte Rydell is one of the authors I'm looking at in my dissertation. I can't find summaries of pretty much any of her books, so I have no idea what this is about, but the title was intriguing. We have 3-in-1 in this one. So this is a collection of The Importance of Being Earnest and other plays. I have read The Importance of Being Earnest and Lady Windermere's Fan. So the 3 that are left are An Ideal Husband, Salome, and A Woman of No Importance. I really enjoyed the first 2 plays that I read by Wilde, so I think I'll enjoy the other 3 as well. Idella by Sarah Grand. This is a New Woman novel. It is also on my Victober TBR. Will I get to it? I don't know, we'll see. The Idylls of the King by Alfred Lord Tennyson. This is poetry. I actually talked a bit about this in my Victorian literature journey tag and how I'm like kind of afraid of poetry, and that's why I haven't read it. I do want to read it though. Tennyson wrote my favorite poem, The Lady of Shalott, so like I think I should theoretically enjoy this. I just need to, you know, get over my thing with the poetry. Impressions of Theophrastus Such by George Eliot, and no, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. This is a novella or short story, kind of, is my impression. The impressions of, anyway. This is Eliot's last piece of fiction that she wrote. So I will be reading it for the final month of the George Eliot project. I don't know what to expect though. Glass Darkly by Sheridan Le Fanu. This is a collection of short stories, and I believe Carmilla, the very famous vampire story, is in here, and I definitely want to read that. It sounds like they're all gothic to some extent, and I love gothic. So, In a Winter City by Ouida. Don't know much about it, but it's by Ouida, so I want to read it. Janet, The Story of a Governess by Margaret Oliphant. This is kind of Oliphant's response to Jane Eyre from the sound of it. So, you know how Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey is kind of parodying, we have a friend, hi. Northanger Abbey is parodying the Mysteries of Udolpho. It sounds like that is what Oliphant is doing with Jane Eyre in Janet. So I'm really interested to read this one and see what it's about. Jill and Jack by Amy Dilwyn. This is the sequel to Jill, which I love, and I know a lot of people are reading this Victober. In this, Jill ends up marrying a guy, Jack, but first they're like basically just vying for the affections of another woman. So I'm really interested to read this and see where Jill's story goes from here. John Halifax Gentleman by Dinah Mullet-Craik. I read Olive and Bread Upon the Waters, and I really want to read more Craik, and this is one of her best known ones. The Jungle Books by Rudyard Kipling. I have read some stories out of here, but not the whole thing, and I would really like to read the whole thing. Notes and Discords by George Egerton. These are short stories. George Egerton is a New Woman writer. I read one of her stories last Victober, The Little Grey Glove, and I would really like to read the rest of her work. Kirstine by Margaret Oliphant. Again, I just like Oliphant. This is a coming-of-age story about a girl going off on her own into the world. The Ladies Lindors by Margaret Oliphant. Again, I just want to read all of Oliphant. The Last Chronicle of Barset by Anthony Trollope, the final book in the Barsetshire series. The Letters of Charlotte Bronte. I have read some of Bronte's letters, but I would really like to read all of them. I'm pretty sure this comes in multiple volumes too. I'm not sure how many. Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens. Little Lord Fauntleroy by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. I am a huge fan of Burnett. I love The Secret Garden and The Little Princess. I have not read this book, which is one that was actually written in the Victorian period. I don't know how this never got read to me as a child, but okay. I would like to read it. Lois the Witch by Elizabeth Gaskell. I'm pretty sure this takes place during the Salem witch trials, is my understanding of it. And I'm really interested to see Gaskell's take on that. Lorna Doone by R.D. Blackmore. Alana Estelle recently reviewed this and it sounded really good and I want to read it. Man and Wife by Wilkie Collins. I almost bought a copy of this, but then I didn't, so my friend bought it. So we're gonna be exchanging Wilkie Collins books because I have one that I bought that she hadn't read either, so. Marian Withers by Geraldine Jewsbury. Did Katie from Books and Things talk about this one? I'm not sure. I know that I first heard of Jewsbury from her with the half-sisters. I'm not sure if she read Marian Withers or not too, and that's how I found out about this one. The Marriage of Eleanor by Margaret Oliphant. It's Margaret Oliphant. Miss Mackenzie by Anthony Trollope. Somebody must have talked about this one and that's why I put it on here. I cannot remember who was talking about it or what they said about it, but clearly I thought it sounded good. Mistress and Maid, A Household Story by Dinah Mullet-Craik. I read an article that talked about this and I was able to get it for free on my Kindle, so. Tumblr's Estate by Charlotte Rydell. Again, I want to read more from Charlotte Rydell and see what else I can incorporate into my dissertation. The Mystery of Edwin Drood by Charles Dickens. This is Charles Dickens' last novel. It is unfinished. I bought this at a like a state fair type thing. It's an antique. I will probably not read it out of this edition, but I am very interested to see what this is like. New Grub Street by George Gissing. So something I'm really interested in is the Victorian publishing market, which is what this is about. So that is why I would like to read it. No Name by Wilkie Collins. This is the one that I bought and am going to be exchanging with my friend once I've read it. I just like Wilkie Collins and want to read more Wilkie Collins, honestly. Noble Life by Dinah Mullet Craik, another one that I was able to get for free on my Kindle. Yay. The Odd Women by George Gissing. Katie from Books and Things has talked very highly of this one as well. It is another New Woman work. The Old Curiosity Shop by Charles Dickens. I feel like I've read a lot of Dickens, but then I'm like going through these and it's like a lot of the heavy hitters I have not read. Okay. Old Nurse's Story by Elizabeth Gaskell. I'm pretty sure this is a supernatural story. On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. So I read in this collection The Subjection of Woman and really liked it, so I want to see what On Liberty is like. Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens. Again, another like big one that I haven't read. Pasquerelle by Ouida. This is another of her Italian novels. Perpetual Curate by Margaret Oliphant. This is another Chronicles of Carlingford. Phineas Finn by Anthony Trollope. Another Palliser book. Phineas Redux by Anthony Trollope. Also a Palliser book. Poor Miss Finch by Wilkie Collins. This one sounds really interesting. I know it's about a woman who is blind. And I attended a panel that had a paper on it at a conference, and it sounded very interesting to me. The Pre-Raphaelites from Rossetti to Ruskin. This is a collection of Pre-Raphaelite poetry. I have read some of them, the ones from Dante Gabriel Rossetti and the ones from Christina Rossetti, but I would really like to read the whole collection. The Prime Minister by Anthony Trollope, another Palliser book. Princess Napraxine by Ouida. This was on my Victober TBR as well. I don't think I'm going to get to it. If I do get to a Ouida book this month, I'm gonna want it to be Ariadne. Real Charlotte by E. Somerville and Martin Ross. Somebody must have talked about this. I don't know if it was somebody on here or if I heard about it at a conference though. Rebecca Rioter by Amy Dilwyn. This is Amy Dilwyn's other fairly well-known one, dealing with some social political issues. Rebel of the Family by Eliza Lynn Linton. Linton is really interesting because she started off in her youth very radical and then became very conservative. So I am interested to see this book. It gets talked about a lot in conjunction with New Women fiction, but I'm not sure if it's a New Woman novel or if it's an anti-New Woman novel. The Rector by Margaret Oliphant. This is one of the short stories in the Chronicles of Carlingford. Also, The Executor is the other short story, but I can never find like a single I can never find anything like a cover for The Executor, so I just have The Rector and we're kind of tagging The Executor on there. Pottage by Mary Cholmondeley. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. This is a New Woman novel, I believe about a woman writer. I really would like to read this. I've heard so many good things. The Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy. I actually started this when I was in my master's, but then didn't finish it. Not because I didn't like it, but because I didn't have time. And now I have this lovely Penguin Black Spine edition, so I definitely want to read it. Reuben Sachs by Amy Levy. I loved The Romance of a Shop. Reuben Sachs, I know, is dealing with the Jewish community in England during the Victorian era, which Amy Levy was a part of. So I'm very interested to read this one. The Rich Husband by Charlotte Rydell. I don't know anything more about it than its title. Just sounded interesting. Ellesmere by Mary Augusta Ward. I read Marcella by Ward, and I would like to read a few more things from her. Robert Ellesmere is probably one of her best known ones. The Romance of Two Worlds by Marie Corelli. I read Corelli's Thelma, and it was really, I liked it a lot. It was weird, but I liked it. This apparently is like kind of a fantasy sci-fi from my understanding of it. I have a friend who read it and she thought it was good, so here it is. Small House at Allington. This is one of the Barsetshire series. The Story of Lily Dawson by Catherine Crowe. Somebody on here talked about it, but I can't remember who. It might have been Kate Howe. Superfluous Woman by Emma Frances Brooke. I think this is a new woman novel. I don't know where I heard about it, possibly just in my reading. Sylvia's Lovers by Elizabeth Gaskell. I have heard that this one is really good, but really sad. So I'll get to it someday. Tales of Glasstown, Angria, and Gondal by the Brontes. I have read some of these, but I know Oxford has a little collection of them that I would really like to get my hands on and read. Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. So I read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland for my exams, but I did not read Through the Looking Glass because that's the one that has this poem that I really hated in my childhood. The Walrus and the Carpenter, and it traumatized me as a child. So I was like, I'm not reading Through the Looking Glass, but I probably should. Two on a Tower by Thomas Hardy. I think I first heard of this from Jennifer Brooks, and it just sounded so lovely. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. I have a physical copy of this. It is just at my parents' house. I think it belonged to my mom. But yeah, I don't know how I made it through my childhood without reading Treasure Island, but I didn't, despite having a copy. Uncle Silas by Sheridan Le Fanu. I think it was Jennifer Brooks who read this last Victober, maybe? But it sounded really good. It's gothic, and I like gothic. Vixen by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. No idea what it's about, but I like Braddon. The Warden by Anthony Trollope. This is the first Chronicles of Barsetshire book. I read Barchester Towers first, but then I found this in the store and I bought it. So it's very short. I just, haven't gotten to it yet. The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope, the Victober group read, which I am actually currently reading and only a little bit into. The Widow Barnaby by Frances Trollope, who is actually the mother of Anthony Trollope. I don't really know what this is about, but Frances Trollope is a very early Victorian woman writer, and I'm very interested to read her. I just really hate this copy because there are no page numbers. How do you have a book with no page numbers? Wing of Azrael by Mona Caird. I read Caird's Daughters of Danaus. It was not my favorite, but apparently The Wing of Azrael is a gothic new woman novel, and that just sounds fantastic, and I want to read it. And finally, The Woman Who Did by Grant Allen, another major new woman work. So, those are the 100 pieces of Victorian literature that I would like to read. I have the list challenge link down below, so definitely go through that and let me know in the comments how many of these have you read? Are there any that you want to read? What are some of the Victorian works that you have on your TBR? It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.